Now it is my pleasure to introduce our co-day chairs for today's program. John Hamer, former president and executive director of Washington News Council. That organization was an independent forum for media ethics that he co-founded in 1998. John retired in 2014, and the News Council retired with him. So I asked John about a highlight during his time with the News Council, and he said, persuading Bill Gates to sing "If I Were a Rich Man" at the Washington News Council Gridiron West dinner. Apparently he was roasting his father, so I can only imagine. John's day co-chair is Dr. Skip Rowland, principal consultant at Banner Cross, a leadership management and human development company. Skip has served as executive director of the Urban Enterprise Center of Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce and focuses on multicultural marketing, international and cross-cultural business development. It also probably will not surprise you that Skip is an adjunct professor and a lecturer around our neighboring universities. So with that, please welcome our co-day chairs for a fabulous upcoming program.
How many of you are fathers? Raise your hands. How many of you have fathers? Okay, that's everybody. Finally, how many of you believe that having a good, strong father engaged in his children's lives is really, really important? Okay, clearly we all agree on that too. Last month, we celebrated Mother's Day, and we all know that having good, strong mothers is also hugely important in our children's lives, whether they're boys or girls. Children do often bond with their mothers. From the very day they're born, moms play a big role in shaping children's lives. But today, we want to concentrate on fatherhood and the vital importance of fathers to children and families. Skip and I are going to answer the questions that we had for Table Talk as well. Skip, what's the most important lesson you learned from your father?
Well, John, the most important lesson that I learned from my father was a deep, profound, research-based respect for womanhood. Yeah, I did. I grew up in a matriarchy. My father grew up in a matriarchy, and there is I think what he did was he taught me how to behave like a man who loved and respected women, and that's what he demonstrated to my mom.
There's Skip.
Yeah, go back one so they can see my dad.
You saw his father.
There
right?
He is. Leon Walter Rowland raised me in his image, and Dad, you're now on the big screen at Seattle 4. My gift to you. I can make your hands clap.
Okay, well, here's a picture of me and my dad. I learned a lot of lessons from my father. When I was in kindergarten, he taught me to tie my shoes. When I was in junior high school, he taught me to tie my tie. When I got to college, he taught me to make a perfect martini. So I guess you could say he taught me to tie my shoes, tie my tie, and tie one on. Okay. Dad would have been 100 years old this year, but he died 2 years ago at the age of 98. This photo is from his last birthday dinner with him. I sat by his hospice bed for the last few days of his life. We talked a lot. I told him how much I loved him and appreciated what he'd done for me over the years. And as I look back, I realized that probably like a lot of us, he taught me most by example. And I was trying to think of what was an example that that stuck with me. After he retired, he decided to start a scholarship for students at Oregon State University, where he graduated from, when it was still Oregon State College, way back. He had struggled a little bit in school. He had to work full time to pay his tuition and expenses. His grades weren't always the highest. So when he set up the scholarship, he had one fast, hard requirement. It would be only for students who had a B or lower average. he figured the top students had plenty of scholarship opportunities, but the C students, like him, were the ones that really needed help. And I thought, that's a great lesson. We should reach out and give a hand to those who might not get all A's, but they're still trying their hardest to succeed. So thanks, Dad, for that lesson.
Well, John, my father didn't teach me how to mix martinis. He drank his gin straight, out of the bottle, that is. And he provided 2 scholarships, one for me and one for my brother. Most of us in the room probably, you were, if you're in this room, lucky enough to have good, strong, loving, and responsible parents, and I'll say fathers. They guided us through childhood, picked us up when we fell down, taught us valuable lessons and solid values, and then they sent us out into the world to make it on our own. But they were always there to help if we needed them. As a result, we achieved some success in life. I think I did. I'm in Seattle 4. Put your hands together if you think that's an accomplishment. Put your hands together if you think being in Seattle 4 is an accomplishment. Being here is one thing, staying here is something else. Rotarian of the Year, laughing down front. All right. One indication of that success is evident in our membership in Seattle 4. And we have several examples in our club of strong and successful fathers who raised equally strong and successful sons and daughters. We've asked some of our members whose fathers or even grandfathers are in Seattle 4 to give us brief testimonials about what their fathers meant to them. So would Ms. Carla Fowler, Mr. Jim McCurdy, Ms. Kathy Williams, and Mr. the great often imitated Don Kraft please come to the podium. Thank you.
While they're coming up, and we're just going to take a minute and ask them to stand here while we know there's some other current members of Seattle Rotary whose fathers or grandfathers are or were in Seattle 4. We want them all to stand and be recognized. As I read your names, please remain standing and hold our applause till they're all standing if you're here. Bill Bain Jr., whose father was Bill Bain Sr. Ron Bailey, whose father was Bob Bailey. Jim Burdett, whose grandfather, Ken Coleman, and father, Elliot Burdett, were both members. Some of them are not able to be here today. Chris Clark, are you here? His grandfather, William G. Clark, and father, Donald L. Clark, were both members. Skip Dupar, you're here, Skip. Is he here? Whose grandfather, Father Frank Dupar Sr. and Father Frank Dupar Jr. were both club presidents. Lori McDonald Johnson, daughter of Stan McDonald. She's out of the country, but she sends her regards. Travis Keeler, son of Howard Keeler. Skip Kotkins, son of Henry Kotkins Sr. There's Skip, okay. Good. Carl Lux, whose father, Bill Lux, and stepmother Nancy were both members. Jeff Pritchard, whose grandfather, Frank Pritchard Sr. and father, Frank Pritchard Jr. were members. Lee Rabel, whose grandfather, Otto Rabel, was the first Paul Harris Fellow in Seattle 4, and his father, Irving Rabel, was also a member of our club. Jim Travis, whose father was Beverly Travis. Eric Weiss, and his father, Fred Weiss. Okay, well, we got a few here. Thanks for being here. Now, raise your hand if your father was a member of any other Rotary Club anywhere else, not Seattle 4, but we have quite a few. Okay, these are our second and third generation Rotary legacy members. This is truly one of the most important things about Rotary. So now we would like Carla, Jim, Kathy, and Don to give brief testimonials to their fathers. They have 2 minutes each. Carla, you're the Sergeant at Arms, so we're going to have you go first. And you can keep time on the other 3. So, you're on.
Thanks, John. So, as kids growing up in our family, our ungranted requests were often met with the response, "Life is tough, save your money." This sounds like sage fatherly advice, but it's much funnier if you consider that my dad's whole career was spent at Milliman as a consulting actuary. His specialty was pension plans. So this theme of planning and preparing was actually woven throughout my childhood experiences. For instance, every summer we would go backpacking in the remote wilderness. And at a very young age, my dad had us take responsibility for packing and carrying our own things. I took this very seriously, and so as a 2-year-old, when we would start to break camp in the morning, I would scream until someone put me in the jerry pack, which is how my mother carried me, and so that I would make sure I did not get left behind. So one of the really interesting experiences of transitioning into adulthood is actually watching your parents shift in their views. And so my dad has always been an avid traveler, and true to form, he produces these amazingly detailed travel itineraries, that are 20 pages long. But as he traveled more, he began to notice that some of the most unique and delightful experiences he had occurred when something unexpected happened or did not go to plan. He came to say that an adventure is what happens when there is the possibility that something could go wrong. As a person who had very much adopted the message that it is important for things to go to plan, this was new and surprising material. And it came at the right time. It came at a time when I had realized that the things that I wanted to do and the impact that I wanted to have in the world were outside the realm that I could completely control. So if an adventure is an endeavor where something can go wrong, and if our adventure in life is to do impactful things, then who we are in the moment when things go wrong matters incredibly. In that moment, you can complain, you can run away, you can pass it off on someone else, you can ignore it. Or, as I saw my dad learn to do over the course of his life, you can be an adventurer. You can be present and stand with others. You can take responsibility and make amends. You can offer support and take on some of the load. You can come to the table with ideas or solutions. These moments often do not make a great story. They are not flashy, and they cannot be romanticized. You don't get an award for this. But I was watching, and I benefited. I know that there are others who deeply appreciate this about you as well, Dad. And so now I get to express my appreciation for your redefinition of adventure and for showing me how to be an adventurer, a skill more empowering than even the best contingency planning. Thank you.
I'm Jim McCurdy. I'm in what they call the sandwich generation. I have elderly parents and children at home. It's interesting. Over the years, I figured out that fatherhood means setting an example. My grandfather set a great example for my father, who has passed on much of that to me. And what I mean by that is setting an example it goes beyond telling your children to sit up at the table or put their napkin in their lap. It's such things as paying your bills, maintaining your assets, helping a neighbor, a friend, a stranger, person on a street corner. It's getting involved in the community and giving back. As many of you know, I'm a third-generation Seattle 4 member and a second-generation past president. Both my grandfather and father set an example of being involved in the community and giving back through Rotary. I don't know how they did it, but I got the message. 20 years later, here I am. My one wish would be that my father told me more about Rotary when I was in high school. Yes, I was probably more involved in sports and skirts than being involved in downtown suits, but I really didn't know what he was doing downtown here in this hotel at luncheons with a bunch of guys in suits. I've tried to be transparent with my kids, and I've brought them to a number of Rotary luncheons, and we've done the Rotary Club, Boys and Girls Club cleanup and the Earth Day Arboretum cleanup and things like that to get them exposed. I would also thank members such as Patrick Carter, Larry Granite, Mark Wright, and certainly Kathy Gibson, who have welcomed them at those kinds of events and made them feel part of the activity. Of course, setting an example can backfire, such as this first time our then toddlers caught me swearing. They promptly reported to their mother, and yes, I had to wash my mouth out with soap. I only did that once. Now that we have teenagers, that's a whole other story. What do I say to my father? Thank you for setting an example. Thank you for showing me Rotary, and thank you for all you've done.
I was very fortunate to have both a grandfather, and a father who were great role models. They didn't tell me what to do and how to live my life, but they showed me by their actions and through their lives. Both were members of Seattle Rotary, and both were presidents of our club. My grandfather, W. Walter Williams, was president in 1941-42. And my father, Walter B. Williams, was president in 1984-85. Both demonstrated a very strong sense of service in all aspects of their lives. In family life, in work life with very high ethical standards, in church life, in political life, and definitely in service and leadership to our local community and to our world. Rotary was a key part of their lives. It both tied into their values and their standards, and it also gave them a vehicle with which they could provide that service, working with other Rotarians in our club and in our world. So for me, far more powerful than stating it, their lives showed that they believe that I and all of us have a responsibility to make this world better. And we can certainly do that through Rotary. Thank you.
Sue told us at the table here that we actually had more time than the 2 minutes were allotted. I want to just have an aside here. This feels like a family reunion to me. I've enjoyed knowing Brad Fowler for all the time that we've been in Rotary together. He actually is the one who told me what an actuary is a guy who was really good at arithmetic but didn't have the personality to be an accountant. And my dad and Mac McCurdy, his grandfather, and W. Walter Williams, her grandfather, were very close friends for many, many years. And it was W. Walter Williams, during that year of 41-42, Walt Williams was our president at the time of Pearl Harbor, and it was he, a month later, who sponsored my dad when it was really tough to get a classification. He got my dad in. So, and so you know, I've got two nephews, Dave and Jim, in this club, and I have a grandson who is a fourth generation Rotarian in Bellevue Lunch Club. So there's a lot of family feeling for me here. My dad was my role model. I wanted to be like him, but I wanted to be different. In the business, he was known as an ad man's ad man. And in this club, because he'd been first vice president of Rotary International, he was known as Mr. Rotary. I started my advertising agency when I was 21 years old, and I was thrilled 3 months later when a guy who didn't know that my dad was a Rotarian sponsored me for membership of the University Rotary Club. Dad gave me these pieces of advice. He says, whatever you do, always do an extra 10%. When I got a new account, he would always say, watch your credit, boy. When I lost an account, he'd say, don't let it get to you personally. And those two pieces of advice served me well through 50 years of the business. When I was president here and tried to do a bunch of things differently, Dad was extremely proud, but he tried very hard not to show it. He often would say, Don has a lot of ideas. I'm sure he'll have a good one yet. He's been gone for 26 years, but in a way, it's always Father's Day, I always have his voice that I hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all for those moving words. Thank you. More. Give them more. Come on. More.
Great words. Thank you so much. I have to point out a serious oversight for which I take complete responsibility in the list of legacy Rotarians. We somehow overlooked Herb Bridge, whose son John Bridge, actually I had asked John originally to be one of the testimonial givers, but he's on the East Coast at a meeting. So, as we all know, the Bridge family are among our most important. Okay.
Thank you. I can remember watching Big Bridge and Little Bridge. That's Big Bridge right there. Yes, sir, Admiral. And Big Jim and Little Jim, that was Little Jim. Yeah, that's Little Jim. And watching them come to Rotary together, and my heart just swelling with pride, because I know what it means to have a father in Seattle 4, although I didn't have one. I knew what it means, and Carla and I chatted about that briefly. Okay, Carla, I'll go faster, right? Okay. Thank you for those moving words. Some of us went to the 5030 conference in Idaho last month, and the theme was, as it appeared to me, children and families in Rotary, and that's what we're here about today. Rotary is in a transition and moving towards a more broader emphasis on families and community, in addition to our traditional focus on business. Having fathers more engaged in their children's lives is one key part of a successful family. But as we all know, not everyone is lucky or blessed enough to have such a solid and inspiring set of fathers as role models as those we saw on the stage today. In our society, fatherlessness is a serious problem. We're now going to focus on what can happen when children do not have strong and responsible fathers in their lives. Some have had much bigger obstacles to overcome than others, and the National Fatherhood Initiative has identified fatherlessness as the root cause of $100 billion a year in taxpayers' costs. Let's give us a few statistics, John.
Okay, this is a maybe more sobering part of our program. We've listed some of the challenges created when there's no father in the home. 90% of all homeless and runaway children are from fatherless homes.
85% of all children that exhibit behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes.
85% of all youths in prisons grew up in fatherless homes.
80% of rapists motivated by displaced anger come from fatherless homes.
75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes.
71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes.
70% of juveniles in state-operated institutions come from fatherless homes.
63% of youth suicides are individuals from fatherless homes.
These statistics come from a variety of sources. Sometimes these numbers vary from state to state, but these are pretty accurate. One person who can attest to these numbers is my friend Marvin Charles, who's here with us today with his wife Jeanette. Most of you will remember Marvin, who was our short program speaker last year, right around Father's Day. Marvin and his wife Jeanette founded and run a small nonprofit here in Seattle called DADS, which stands for Divine Alternatives for Dads Services. I urge you to spend some time on their website to learn some more about this great group. Here's their website address. It's a faith-based nonprofit. It helps fathers re-engage with their children in their children's lives. Small office down on Rainier Avenue South in Hillman City. Marvin's life story is truly amazing. And he has just written a book about his life and his current work. The title is Becoming Dads, A Mission to Restore Absent Fathers. Copies are available for sale today on the table out front. It's a great read. I highly recommend that you you pick a copy up. Here's Marvin, his wife Jeanette, and their daughter Marvette, who you're going to hear from shortly.
John, I've known Marvin since roughly 1985, 1990. He came to my office several years ago when I was at the Greater Seattle Chamber of Commerce with John Fluke and Jeff Kemp talking about this project. Marvin and his lovely wife Jeanette founded Dads in the year 2000, and now they help fathers re-engage with their children and become responsible. They've helped over 3,000 men reunite with over 6,000 of their children. Their vision, stronger fathers, healthier communities. Marvin believes from personal experience that the biggest problem facing our nation today is not crime, guns, drugs, and alcohol, teen pregnancy, or gang violence. These are just the result of a larger problem, which is fatherlessness.
Marvin knows a lot about fatherlessness. His father abandoned his mother, who was only 14 years old when she had Marvin. The state took Marvin away from his mother when he was only 6 months old. He was placed in several different foster homes. Some of his foster parents were abusive, either mentally or physically. As a teenager, he began a life of drug and alcohol abuse, crime, arrests, and incarceration. Marvin fathered 8 children himself with 5 different mothers. He's the first to admit that his life was on the wrong track. But he met Jeanette, and 18 years ago, Marvin and Jeanette had a baby daughter. He didn't think they would be able to care for the child, so he went to Harborview Hospital and was going to leave the baby on the front steps. That was the moment he decided to turn his life around. He and his wife, Jeanette, put their faith and trust in God, recovered from their addictions, and changed their lives. So now I'm going to ask Marvin to come up on stage with his special guest who's going to speak to us today, his daughter, Marvette.
So I get the opportunity to present to some and introduce to others my life changer. That's what I call Marvette, my life changer. Because when I walked out of that drug-filled environment with this 7-month-old baby, I was headed to Harborview Hospital to leave her on the steps because I felt anybody could do better than what I was doing. I was the poorest example of a father that anyone could imagine. But I got to the hospital and I started to cry. I couldn't figure this wasn't right. So I went to a women's shelter and I asked them, could you do anything for a man who was 40 plus years old with a 7-month-old baby? And they told me no. They said, your best opportunity is to take her to the CPS office, Child Protection Agency. And that's where I headed. I was desperate. I walked into that office and they weren't really happy to see me because they already had 2 other kids of mine and had been looking for me for 2 years, and here I show up with another baby. But again, I call her my life changer because I realized I needed to do something. See, I was putting on her and them what had already been put on me. I was recreating in her life what was created in mine. So after 2 years of really doing what was supposed to be done, the right thing, my wife and I were able to bring her home. So here's a young lady that I had almost dropped off at the hospital when last year I got the opportunity to drop her off at college. So I want to introduce to you my life changer, Marvin Charles.
I guess I'll start by saying thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. It's a life changer in itself. I am a college student. I'll be going into my sophomore year next year at Langston University in Oklahoma. I'm a criminal justice major with the hopes of becoming an attorney, and so I want to go to law school after. I wanted to answer the question. I don't remember it like verbatim, but something my dad has taught me, and over the years, I would say he rarely used words when he taught me. There are situations, I guess what he taught me was to basically know your life and the decisions you make and how they'll affect your life. How he did that, a few examples. When I was in middle school, he allowed my brothers and sisters and I to go and choose our place of worship. And we had been in a situation that it was just time to transition. And so having that opportunity, it's not something that my peers were able to have. There were situations where I've had speaking engagements where I've just had to do it by myself, and not for the lack of support, but because Marvette needed to be able to know what she was doing for herself and take the tools that she's learned from her parents and watching them do it and be able to use them in real life settings. Going to college, and there were situations where I had to figure things out using what I learned without the actual words, the actual verbiage from my parents in my ear. I had to go forth in things I wasn't sure of, and I probably was scared of, but I had to do it. And from that, I've grown so much more. This last year in Oklahoma has grown me as an individual. And that's something that I can proudly say, because those times were extremely hard. And in that moment, I was like frustrated, and I'm just like, I don't know what to do, but I'm in this place now where I'm so grateful for that experience and for the, lack of better wording, the absent support, because he wasn't physically there, but he was there. There's so many things. If I went down the list, it would be entirely too long. I don't have time for that. I do want to read something that I wrote. I graduated high school last year in June, and from there, I ended up taking a few courses at Seattle University, one which was an English course. And the assignment was to write an op-ed piece, not thinking it would go into the newspaper, but just write it. I love to write, and so when I write, when given a prompt, I don't necessarily go for the easier, but I go with what they won't expect. I go with what I don't think everybody else will do. And from that, I kind of just flow. I love to write. And so this is what I wrote. If you know anything about AIDS, then you know that AIDS itself doesn't kill you. It opens you up to infections, and the infection is what kills you. Well, fatherlessness is just the same. When you take a father out of the home, the family doesn't die. What happens is that it opens them up for infection. Infections like gang violence, at-risk youth behavior, drugs, criminal activity, teenage pregnancy, etc. Fatherlessness is like the big elephant in the room that no one wants to address. 43% of US children live without their father. 71% of pregnant teenagers lack a father. 85% of youth in prison grow up in a fatherless home. Fatherless children are twice as likely to drop out of high school, twice as likely to end up in jail, and 4 times more likely to need help for emotional or behavioral problems. My dad was the product of fatherlessness. He was conceived by a 14-year-old girl and a 20-year-old man. Now, if you imagine yourself as a father, would you allow your 14-year-old to bring a 20-year-old home? A lot of times the answer to that question is no. But the real question is, how can daddy stop it if he isn't there? How can daddy have any positive effect on his children's lives if he isn't there? My dad was born 4 days before my grandmother's 15th birthday. She was raised by a single mother, and as a result, she got pregnant at an early age. More presently, I myself see the effects of fatherlessness on a regular. All of my best friends are products of fatherless homes. 1 of 4 of them has successfully finished high school without a baby and not abusing a substance. But the most shocking part about fatherlessness is the absence of it, or the acceptance of it. It's gotten to a point where not having a father present is the norm. Actually having a father present is strange. And don't fix your lips to ever call the man that merely took equal part in creating their child their father. If so, be prepared to more aggressively hear, "You mean my sperm donor." It's crazy, but it's a reality of fatherlessness, that your absence can denounce you of your parental title. It's not out of disrespect, and it's not, hey, let me just call them this, but it's a hurt, and it's the way that they show it. As a child, your way of giving up when you can't be in contact with your father or they don't come to you is simply to act out in places like school and home and the streets. And a lot of times those actions are what the child no longer cares to express. They invest themselves in what will give back without a place for absence. And while outsiders may never understand the pain caused by the absence of a father, one should take the time to at least empathize with the feeling of absence in general. Thank you.
John and Skip, thank you so much for putting together today's program. Hi. We've got, let's see, Carla?
How are we doing?
We've got 3 minutes. So do you got 1 minute worth of content?
Yeah.
Okay.
Less than that.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say thank you, Marvin and Jeanette and Marvette. And their daughter Jamie is here too for this very powerful Father's Day message. Some of you know I'm not a father myself. I didn't have children in my first marriage. But thanks to a second marriage, I'm now a stepfather. And thanks to my 2 wonderful stepsons, I'm now a grandfather of 2 terrific grandchildren with a third due 2 weeks from today. So I just want to say, whether we are fathers, grandfathers, godfathers, uncles, cousins, mentors, tutors, or just friends, all of us as men can play a positive role in young people's lives, and we should. Because as we've heard today from all of our speakers, what our children see us do and hear us say as they grow up makes a huge difference. Happy Father's Day, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Marvette and Charles and family, for being here with us, and to our members. My father is delightfully imperfect, and he is my North Star. Raising 2 young ladies mostly on his own was no easy task, but his way was sure and steady. When I ditched my closet and began draping clothes throughout my bedroom, he asked me nicely to put them away. Then he asked sternly. Then a hefty trash bag filled with my clothes remained in the barn until I gradually earned them back. My father taught me we value what we invest and appreciate what we earn. To this day, his outlook faithfully returns. A favor that has served me well this year: honey, if this is the worst thing that happens, we're doing okay. Our world sells glamour and perfection. Hearts thirst for authenticity and soul. See you next week.